The Nimda virus. Computer viruses are alive. Stephen Hawking. Let's take some pre-test questions. Many steps are taken before, during, and after an incident. Of the following choices, what accurately identifies the incident response lifecycle? A. Preparation, deletion, analysis, eradication, recovery, and post-incident recovery. B. Detection and analysis, containment, backup, eradication, and post-incident recovery. C. Preparation, detection, and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery, and post-incident recovery. D. Preparation, detection, deletion, and analysis, containment, and recovery, and post-incident recovery. Question 2. Some malware can execute on a user system after the user accesses a website. The malware executes from within the web browser. What type of malware is this? A. Virus, B. Worm, C. Trojan horse, or D. Mobile code? And question 3. A malicious virus is replicating and causing damage to computers. How do security professionals refer to the virus? A. In the open, B. In the containment field, C. In the jungle, or D. In the wild? Let's begin the presentation. The Nimda virus was released on September 18th of 2001, 1 week after the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center and Pentagon. The first reports of the virus started at about 9 a.m., which was at almost the exact same day and time at which the terrorist attacks began 1 week earlier, causing fear of another terrorist attack. However, there was no link found between the two. The Nimda virus could be caught just by surfing the internet. For its time, it was considered the fastest spreading virus ever. At first glance, an email attachment in Microsoft Outlook emails appeared to be the source of the virus. The original emails appeared to be sent by Mickey Hyppinen, a manager of antivirus research at Data Fellows, now F-Secure, a cybersecurity software company. Opening the attachment named readme.exe caused the computer to run a program searching for 16 known security holes in Microsoft Internet Information Server, IIS software. Later, it was discovered to be much more complex than first thought. Not only did the virus attack IIS, but it attacked home users of Microsoft Outlook and replicated itself through networks and the Internet. Nimda is admin spelled backwards. It targeted Windows-based servers and computers. It caused websites across the world to shut down. It was written in JavaScript. In the code, this line was found: Concept Virus CV, V5, copyright 2001 RP China. It was described as a complex denial-of-service worm virus. Its damage was estimated between $500 million and $1.5 billion. A multiple component incident is a single incident that includes two or more other incidents. The incidents are related to each other, but this isn't always apparent right away. Yahoo was one of the first companies infected by Nimda. The virus clogged internet traffic and email access with junk, slowing them down considerably. If internet users visited an infected website, their computer and network files could be infiltrated by the virus. Not only did it infect files, it spread by email, websites, and local connected networks. It infected all versions of Windows from Windows 95 through Windows 2000, as well as Microsoft's IIS. In 22 minutes, it became the Internet's most widespread virus to date. Malware is any kind of viruses, worms, Trojan horses, mobile code, and other types of software intended to infect a system. Viruses and other malware that are replicating and causing harm to computers are in the wild. Nimda was certainly in the wild and was a combination of worm, virus, Trojan horse, and mobile code. Viruses spread maliciously throughout executable files, .exe files or .dll files. Viruses attach themselves to applications and execute when the application executes. Viruses have 3 phases: replication, activation, and objective. Their first goal is to replicate to other applications. At some point, they activate to launch the objective. The virus payroll is launched as the objective. This is the most dangerous part of the program. It's when the virus inflicts damage on the system or network. In some cases, the objective can be to contact a control server in a botnet to download additional malware. Nimda scanned the internet for Microsoft IIS web servers. When a server was found, if it had open security holes, Nimda entered and modified random web pages on the server, as well as any additional .exe files found on the server. It searched for executable files and added them to itself as a resource. When the executable file on the server downloaded, it then spread the virus. Nimda added a line of JavaScript to web pages that, when browsed by any type of user on a client machine, caused a virus file, readme.exe, to be executed automatically by Outlook users. Nimda propagated to other servers via FTP and to other users by adding its own SMTP forwarding engine to send the virus to all the email recipients that it found. It also made the hard disks on the server shareable for anyone. Now, there were also different versions of Nimda. Nimda A was the first release, and it used readme.exe and readme.eml files. Nimda B, released shortly after, used puta.scr and puta.eml files. Additional variants of the virus occurred in Nimda C, D, and E. They used different variations of names of the files. A worm is a malicious, self-replicating program. They don't need a host, usually an executable, as a virus does. Worms commonly have a virus component. They travel over the network using the worm component, and then when they arrive at a system, they install a virus. Nimda took advantage of numerous security loopholes in Microsoft Web Server and browser, so they used IIS and Internet Explorer. It dropped malicious files in local folders and network shares and attached itself to executables. Web servers were infected just by visiting infected sites. A denial of service attack prevents a system from providing a service. A DOS attack comes from a single attacker. A distributed denial of service, DDoS attack, comes from multiple systems. Nimda deposed unwanted files in local and network folders. It attached itself to executables and propagated rapidly through local internets, through local networks and the internet. Nimda would appear as a readme.exe attachment to an email. It could also appear in any .exe file with over 5 characters in the root name. If run, it first copied itself to a temporary directory with a random name in the form mep.tmp. It then ran itself from that folder. The first thing the launcher did was to see if it had enough resources to run the main worm. If it did, extracted itself from the infected.exe file and executed. Using the current time and some arithmetic operations, the worm determined if it could delete files from the temporary folder. Once it did that, the worm built its primary infection tool, an MIME encoded copy of itself, and a multi-part message that it could attach to. Nimda next looked for a process called Explorer. This was Windows Explorer. In some case, it opened the process and assigned itself to a remote thread under Windows Explorer. If that failed, the worm used API information to get needed information about the local computer. Then it took a break. When it woke back up, Nimda checked to see what operating system it was running. If it was NT, it compacted itself and copied itself out to load.exe in the Windows System folder. The system.ini file was modified to start with the shell Windows Explorer as usual, but with load.exe -don't run old as well. This assured the worm would run at each system start. Finally, the worm copied itself to riched20.dll, also in the system folder, and set the file to hidden and system. When it was done, Nimda looked for shared network resources and started to scan those on remote computers. There it was looking for .doc and .eml files, that's the Outlook files. When found, riched20, DLL was copied to the directory so it would run when any OLE component was needed on the remote computer. Then it started the infection process on the remote computer. When looking around the remote computer, Nimda copied infected.eml and sometimes NWS files with names similar to HTML files already found on that remote computer. These files also infected the remote computer. Using the IP address of the infected computer, the worm searched for IIS servers to infect using a known backdoor. The idea is if the current computer was not properly protected, then other local computers may not be protected as well. So 50% of the probes will be using nearby IP addresses. A Trojan horse appears to be something useful, but also includes a malicious component. For example, it might look like a game or a screensaver. However, it also includes malware. Some Trojan horses keep the malicious software installed even if you uninstall the original application. In this case, Nimda turned innocent web pages into Trojan horses. It attached malicious JavaScript to web pages. The virus then propagated through the IIS server to email clients. Mobile code includes different types of malware that executes when a user visits a website or opens an email. Some of the language and methods used are Java, ActiveX, JavaScript, and VBScript. In Nimda, if a user opened the readme.exe email attachment, the JavaScript was executed. Also, the worm searched through all the HTML and HTML files in the temporary internet file folders for email addresses. It read through users' inbox and collected sender addresses. When the address list was ready, it used its own SMTP engine to send the infected messages. The worm also searched drives for HTML, ASP, and HTML files. And if it found those files, the worm created readme.eml files in the same directory and added some JavaScript to the end of found files. The JavaScript code would open readme.eml files when the infected HTML file was loaded by a web browser. As a result, the meme-encoded worm would get activated because of a security hole, and the infection would commence. The worm's file ran from a minimized window when downloaded from an infected web server. This technique affected users who were browsing the web with Internet Explorer 5.0 or 5.01. So we can look at it this way. Nimda's life cycle contained 4 parts. A file infection. Nimda located exe files from the local machine and infected them by putting the file inside its body as a resource, thus assimilating the files then spread the infection when people exchange programs such as games. It was a mass emailer. Nimda found email addresses through MAPI from the email client, as well as searching through HTML files for additional addresses. Then it sent one email to each address, and these mails contained an attachment called readme.exe, and it might even execute automatically. A web worm. Nimda scanned the internet trying to locate IIS servers. Once a web server was found, the worm tried to infect it by using several known security holes. If it succeeded, the worm modified random web pages on the site, hiding as a Trojan horse. The result of this was that web servers browsing the site were automatically infected by the mobile code. And then LAN propagation. The worm searched for file shares on the local network, either from file servers or from end-user machines. Once found, it dropped a hidden file into a directory that had a document or an EML file. And when other users tried to open a doc or EML file from this directory, Word, WordPad, or Outlook executed files causing an infection of the PC. The worm infected remote files if it was started on a server. The incident response life cycle includes 4 phases. The first is preparation, and this includes creating an incident response team or CIRT, C-I-R-T plan, defining incidents, and creating CIRTs. The team members are trained and have specific roles and requirements. They know how to recognize, contain, and mitigate incidents such as Nimda. The second phase is detection and analysis. This phase uses different controls to detect incidents. It includes intrusion detection systems and software. Some detected events may not actually be incidents, We need to investigate and analyze events to determine if they are actual incidents or false positives. Then containment, eradication, and recovery. Once an incident is detected, it needs to be contained as quickly as possible. It can be simply as removing the cable from the network on the infected system. The source of attack is then removed. For example, if a system is infected with malware, the malware can be removed. You can then return the system to normal operations. Attacks many times include several elements, such as Nimda. After eradicating one element, you often have to repeat the detection and analysis step. You repeat the process until you're verified that you've eradicated all malicious elements. Only then do you move on to the post-incident recovery phase. Here, after-action review is conducted. You examine the incident and response to determine if there are any lessons to be learned. The goals are to determine if the response was effective as possible, and if the response can be improved. When warranted, you modify the CERT plan to include these lessons. So how was Nimda fixed? Every major antivirus company updated software to detect and remove Nimda. Microsoft provided patches for web servers and home computers. This included IIS, Outlook, Outlook Express, and Internet Explorer. Individual companies and home users needed to have their antivirus software up to date and running. Companies with infected websites need to examine their web pages. Individual web pages needed to be cleaned or recreated. So what was involved with the fix? Behind the scenes, what did the antivirus software do? It removed the virus code from all executable files on the local computer. It deleted specific exe files such as load.exe and admin.dll and riched20.dll and replaced them with new clean versions. It deleted all infected EML and NWS files. It edited the system.ini file. It deleted all temporary files. It removed all shares from local hard drives and renewed those shares with correct access rights if needed. It removed guest accounts from administrator groups if needed, and it checked all HTML, ASP, and HTML files, as well as files that have default, index, main, and README words in their file names. It made sure these files had all virus code removed, and any files referring to readme.eml files cleaned. It removed the backdoor from IIS and corrected Windows Explorer settings that made Explorer hide certain files and extensions. A multipartite virus is a virus that uses multiple infection methods. It often requires more steps or complex procedures to eradicate than simpler malware. The complex Nimda virus was eradicated with little lasting damage for the most part. It did not erase data. It was able to be cleaned with the virus protection tools provided by vendors. Nimda was credited with several firsts in its infection techniques. It was the first to infect .exe files by embedding them into itself as a resource. It also infected web pages, so unsecure browsers would infect upon viewing the web page. Finally, Nimda was the first worm to use any user's computers to scan a network for vulnerable machines behind a firewall to attack. So how should we handle malware incidents? If the incident was a result of malware software, you can use several steps. So how do we handle DOS attack incidents? If the attack is a denial of service attack, you can use a checklist designed to address these attacks. You can design the checklist for a standalone checklist or in conjunction with a generic checklist. Consider the following items. Containment. Halt the DOS attack as soon as possible. You may be able to add filters at routers or firewalls to block the traffic based on the IP address, port, or protocol used in the attack. Note Nimda was the first attack behind a firewall. If you're unable to block it in your network, your ISP may be able to help. You should disconnect the server only as a last resort. Once it's disconnected, the service is stopped, which is the primary objective of a DOS attack. Eradication. Identify the vulnerabilities that allowed the DOS attack. It could be because the server wasn't adequately hardened. For example, there may be unused protocols enabled on the system. The server may not have up-to-date patches. After identifying the vulnerabilities, take steps to mitigate them. And then recovery. Determine if there's any long-term damage on the server and repair it. The attack may have installed malware. Consider performing a malware scan with updated antivirus software. After recovery, test the system to ensure it's operating normally. If an incident was a result of malicious software, you can take several additional steps. These are in addition to the steps of the generic checklist. If desired, you can create a specific checklist for malware incidents. You could also use a separate checklist for malware or combine them into the generic checklist. Consider the following items when creating a checklist for malware incidents. Containment. Identify all the infected systems and disconnect them from the network. Identify why the antivirus software didn't detect the malware. For example, the antivirus software might have been disabled, or the antivirus signatures may have been out of date. Update the antivirus signatures and ensure the antivirus software is enabled. If necessary, configure the firewall or router rules to block the malware from being transmitted to or from the infected system. In Nimda's case, it was a new virus, and the antivirus companies needed some time to code the solution. Eradication. Run full scans on the system. Antivirus vendors often host pages that show detailed steps to remove multipartite viruses and other advanced malware. If necessary, perform individual steps to remove all elements of the malware from the system. Disinfect, quarantine, or delete infected files. Recovery. Replace any files that were deleted or quarantined and are needed for system operation. Nimda might have damaged some web pages. Verify the system is no longer infected. If multiple steps were required to clean the system, consider running another full scan before returning the system to operation. So let's review the questions. Many steps are taken before, during, and after an incident. Of the following choices, what accurately identifies the incident response lifecycle? The answer is B, detection and analysis, containment, backup, and eradication, and post-incident recovery. Question 2. Some malware can execute on a user's system after the user accesses a website. The malware executes from within the web browser. The answer is D, mobile code. Question 3. A malicious virus is replicating, causing damage to computers. How do security professionals refer to the virus? The answer is D, in the wild.